around. So now he sleeps 6 feet in the ground. I said, well, 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 Lord, somebody's calling my name. Well, 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 Lord, somebody's calling my name. And I was on the road about long years, roaming through the land and spreading feet. They locked me down and pushed me back in 48. Now the hangman's the calling and I can't be late. Well, 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 Lord, somebody's calling my name. Well, 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 Lord, somebody's calling my name. Well, 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 Lord, somebody's calling my name. Well, 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 Lord, somebody's calling my name.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us for the 2020 March on Washington Film Festival opening night gala. And now, please welcome renowned jazz harmonicist, Frederick Yonay.
Thank you very much. Good evening. We're extremely excited to kick off the show. Welcome to Jazz Club Quarantine, a place we created to keep each one of the musicians safe, but not quiet. And before we start, I want to acknowledge the fearless Ruth Bader Ginsburg. May she rest in peace. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of the evening.
Thank you, Fred, and good evening, everyone. It is a pleasure to once again be joining you as the Master of Ceremonies for the March on Washington Film Festival Opening Night Gala. I know you're all looking forward to the educational and entertaining events that are in store for you this week, but tonight we gather virtually to celebrate three important voices of the movement. The President and CEO of the Southern Poverty Law Center, Margaret Wang, the U.S. Congresswoman representing California's 43rd District, Maxine Waters, and an American icon, the late Congressman John Lewis. We'll also be joined by some talented artists who will share their amazing gifts with us, as well as friends and colleagues of our honorees. 2020 has been a year of uncertainty and turmoil, with a global pandemic, economic uncertainty, and especially the social unrest happening across America due to the ongoing state of racism. It is now more apparent than ever how vital and necessary the March on Washington Film Festival is, and the importance of the history it recounts and the voices it highlights. With that in mind, it is now my distinct pleasure to introduce the founder of the March on Washington Film Festival, Mr. Robert Rabin.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. Thank you for blessing us with your presence tonight. The March on Washington Film Festival began in 2013 as a cinematic expression to mark the 50th anniversary of the historic March on Washington. Since then, it has evolved and expanded in ways I never imagined. It's become one of our nation's most impactful festivals, centered around film, but focused on social justice. We would not be able to present the March on Washington Festival or this evening's production without the support of our sponsors, and I extend our deep appreciation to all the companies, organizations, and individuals whose deep commitment to social justice fuels our cause and makes all this possible. I'd like to give special thanks to tonight's presenting sponsor, T-Mobile, our official media partner, Variety, the Mellon Foundation, David Frederick and Sophie Lynn, and AT&T. I also want to recognize and offer my heartfelt thanks to the dedicated team of staff and consultants at the March on Washington Film Festival, particularly Isa Sarabay, our artistic director, and Kimball Stroud and her staff, who've made tonight elegant. I want to thank our dedicated board of directors, chaired by attorney Samara Fox, who you'll be hearing from a little later tonight, and to Suzanne Stoll, who co-founded this festival with me 8 years ago, whose heart and passion lives with us. Thank you for your energy, insight, and passion in bringing our idea to life. We would not be here without you. Now it is my incredible pleasure to introduce you to Marie Sela Dixon, the Vice President of Federal Government and External Affairs for T-Mobile US, and my friend.
Good evening. Thank you for this opportunity to address the opening night virtual gala of the 2020 March on Washington Film Festival. On behalf of T-Mobile, we're honored to join you as presenting sponsor. Like all of us, I was saddened this year by the passing of a true icon for peace and justice, Congressman and civil rights leader John Lewis, conscious of the Congress. But we rejoice in this opportunity to celebrate him and remind ourselves that it's on us to pick up the torch and continue the important work that still must be done. I fondly remember a journey I took with Congressman Lewis in 2013 during a faith and politics tour through parts of Alabama. I remember his lively explanation of the places we passed and the things we were seeing along the way. During this journey, the chief of police from Montgomery, Alabama, unexpectedly presented Congressman Lewis with an honorary police badge and publicly apologized to him on behalf of the entire Montgomery Police Department for what happened when the police failed to protect the Freedom Riders in 1961. John Lewis was moved in that moment and graciously accepted the badge and the apology. That day, like so many others, John Lewis showed grace. He showed forgiveness, kindness, and a commitment to a greater purpose, virtues so desperately needed in our nation today. We also honor John Lewis tonight through the storytelling of film, lifting the voices and experiences that have been part of the fight for social justice, but often forgotten. This year's festival theme, Who Tells the Story, comes at a challenging time. A global health pandemic has laid bare the persistent vulnerabilities and inequities in Black and Brown communities. We at T-Mobile stand with the movement to end racial injustice, and we're committed to building a pathway for success for underrepresented communities. We believe the benefits of next-generation wireless technology, 5G, belong to all of us. We can close the digital divide if we work together. We're committed to do this, and I know you are too. Thank you. And congratulations to Congresswoman Maxine Waters and all of the honorees. And have a great festival. Thank you.
As you can see, we have a remarkable week of films, workshops, and roundtables to look forward to. If you haven't already done so, please go to the festival website, marchonwashingtonfilmfestival.org, and secure your tickets to all the great programming being presented this year. The March On Awards were created to recognize leaders whose devotion to the advancement of civil rights is unwavering. Through their actions and with courage, our honorees have ignited national conversations, compelled progress, and have used their platforms as instruments for social change. As foot soldiers in the fight against injustice everywhere, we honor their work, commitment, and ongoing efforts to continue the march forward. Our first presenter holds many admirable titles: President of Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights, accomplished lawyer and activist, New York Times best-selling author, humanitarian, and proud mother. As the daughter of Robert and Ethel Kennedy, she has sustained her family's legacy by devoting more than 40 years to the pursuit of equal justice and the promotion and protection of basic rights. Here to present our first March On Award of the evening, please welcome Ms. Kerry Kennedy.
Thanks, Jonathan. It's great to be with you this evening. Half a century ago, John Lewis led a peaceful group of 600 brave civil rights marchers across the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama, knowing they would be clubbed mercilessly by state police massed on the other side. That day in 1965, they also knew there was no going back, not to the safe side of the bridge, not to the despair of the Jim Crow South, not to the back of Rosa Parks' bus or the back of any other place ever again. Less than 6 months later, the Voting Rights Act was signed into law, and Alabama moved forward with the rest of the nation to slowly begin replacing hate with hope and opportunity. John Lewis inspired a generation. Margaret Wang is a child of that generation. Like John Lewis, she's devoted her entire life to racial and economic justice. I was privileged to work with Margaret at Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights, where she brought cases before the Inter-American Court for Human Rights. As the leader of Amnesty International, she focused international attention on women and men who are the John Lewises of their countries, people who face imprisonment, torture, and death for basic rights most of us are lucky enough to take for granted. All this prepared her for her leadership at the Southern Poverty Law Center. The SPLC is known across the globe for bankrupting the Klan and bringing down the haters. That work today, when our political leaders openly seek division, is more important than ever. The work on stopping the hate, on jailing the haters, and coming to the aid of children separated from their families, immigrants, people of color still suffering from leftover Jim Crow practices, and their cutting-edge work on ending money bail. When my father, Bobby Kennedy, was with John Lewis, he said something that reminds me of what we're going through today. He said, what we need in the United States is not division. What we need in the United States is not hatred. What we need in the United States is not violence and lawlessness, but is love and wisdom and compassion towards one another and a feeling of justice to those who still suffer within our country. That's what Margaret Wang is all about. Thank you, Margaret, for leading us to good trouble. And now it is my great pleasure to present the 2020 March On Award to my friend, Margaret Wang.
Thank you, Kerry, for that lovely introduction. The human rights movement is graced to have your leadership, and the work of the Robert F. Kennedy Center for Human Rights is more important than ever. It is deeply humbling to accept this award from the March on Washington Film Festival and to be in the same company with the inestimable John Lewis. As a child of Asian heritage growing up in the South, I eagerly read and heard the stories of the civil rights movement as I faced my own battles with racism, discrimination, and othering. It was the collective activism of the movement that inspired me and encouraged me to be part of its ongoing mission to achieve justice. That is why this award truly belongs to the many dedicated, passionate people at the Southern Poverty Law Center who do the hard work day in and day out to fight against systemic racism and injustice. For nearly 50 years, the SPLC has been working to achieve the promise of the civil rights movement. Together with our communities in the South and beyond, we have sought to stamp out remnants of the Jim Crow laws, to expose some of the nation's most violent white supremacist groups, and to protect the rights of children, women, the disabled, immigrants and migrant workers, the LGBTQ community, those in jails and prisons, and all who face discrimination, abuse, and exploitation. But given the racial disparities laid bare by the global coronavirus pandemic, and the painful reminders of the systemic racism in our law enforcement agencies and other institutions, our work is far from over. Across all parts of our society, systemic racism is affecting African Americans, Indigenous people, and people of color throughout the United States. The theme of this year's festival, Who Tells the Story, captures the importance of this moment in our nation's history. It is past time that we reject the structural racism that has denied so many Black and Brown people the opportunity to tell their stories. Today, on behalf of the SPLC, thank you for this award. Thank you to all who have supported our work. And we invite you to join with us as the march continues for justice, equity, and liberation for all.
Thank you, Margaret, and congratulations. You know our next presenter as a longtime host and political commentator on MSNBC. Her new primetime show, The Readout, launched this past July and has solidified her as a leading voice on the cable news landscape. Night after night, she speaks thoughtfully to the complex issues of the day, making them approachable topics for her viewers, and she consistently books interviews with America's leading politicians, experts, and newsmakers, all while adding her own unique insight to the conversation. And now, to present our next March On Award, it is my pleasure to introduce my dear friend, Ms. Joyanne Reed.
Thanks so much, Jonathan. Really appreciate it. And hello, everyone. I'm Joy Reid from MSNBC's The Readout, and I am so excited to introduce the recipient of the March On Award, the great, the amazing Congresswoman Maxine Waters. Now, Congresswoman Waters has been serving her community since December of 1976. Now, I was 8 years old at the time, so I didn't actually know who the Congresswoman was at the time, but I sure found out. And the time that I actually got to know the Congresswoman personally was when I was working as managing editor of thegrio.com, and in the summer of 2011, the Congressional Black Caucus held the For the People Job Tour. And this was an effort to make sure that the Obama administration and that the Congress at the time focus on the issues of Black economics, Black unemployment and poverty, and all of these issues that had been hurting the African American community, and that the Congresswoman and the other members of the CBC wanted to see addressed. So we were going to cover the For the People Jobs Tour, but we were going to cover it digitally just for the first one. And we figured, we'll catch up as the tour goes along. But the first one, we just covered it digitally. Well, boy, were we wrong. Because that first day, Congresswoman Waters stood up on that stage and she fiercely demanded that the Obama administration take action now for Black people, for Black economics and joblessness. And she was so fierce that we all looked around the room at 30 Rockefeller Plaza and went, we got to get on the road. And so I wound up covering in person in Atlanta and then in Miami. And in Miami, the Congresswoman stood up with an Obama administration official on the dais and said, nope, it's not enough. We need to see specific numbers. We need to see specific targeting. And you need to make sure that you say Black, capital B, please, and that you put that in the policies so that the policies can be specific and targeted. Everybody went silent and listened to this woman speak because Congresswoman Waters was not having it. And I went up to her both in Atlanta, but then in Miami, and really just introduced myself and spoke with her. And ever since then, the Congresswoman has been there in my corner. She's been a source not just of great advice and strength, but also personal support. At times in my career, when I needed a boost, I would look down at my phone. The first time I got a text from the Congresswoman, it was actually from her chief of staff, so I didn't know the number. I picked it up and picked up the phone, and it was the chief of staff saying, the Congresswoman would like to speak with you. So I called her back, and the Congresswoman just gave me the best support ever. I have gotten texts on my birthday. I've gotten a video that's been played on my other show, my previous show, AM Joy, that was a surprise. I've always felt from the Congresswoman that she was not only there for me as a journalist, as a woman in this business, but just as a person. She's just someone who cares, and she's somebody who lets you know that she cares and she's there for you. But we know that beyond that, the Congresswoman, who's also made history as the first Black woman and the first Black Congresswoman ever to chair the Financial Services Committee in the House. She's somebody who is empowered and that empowers others. This is the reason that she got the nickname Auntie Maxine, because the young people know as well that the Congresswoman is looking out for them and looking out for everyone, and they recognize that and they relate to her. And so whether she's standing up to the current president and being the first Congresswoman, the first member to come out and say, we must impeach, and standing up to that even when other Democrats were really not feeling it, and then following through and making sure that it was done, constantly making sure that investigations into things like Deutsche Bank continue and never let up, whether it's standing beside John Lewis, the late, great John Lewis, in demanding police reform and ending gun violence. She's been there every time. I can remember in 1992 just seeing the Congresswoman on television standing up during the Rodney King situation and saying proudly and strongly, no justice, no peace. The Congresswoman has never been afraid to stand up for what is right. I can't think of anyone who is a better recipient of the March On Award, because Congresswoman Waters is a civil rights advocate as well as an advocate for our community and for her community. She's been there standing up for the communities of Watts, places that have suffered and that need somebody to stand up for them. So Congresswoman, oh, and I have to add one more thing. When you interview Congresswoman Maxine Waters on your TV show, she will always show up perfect and done. And so the hair and makeup team need not add, they need only enhance. So she is an incredible guest. We always love to have on, and she's always lovely to everyone on the team from top to bottom. So I am so excited to introduce the Congresswoman, to congratulate her, and to say, Congresswoman, you are so deserving and so wonderful. So without further ado, here she is, Congresswoman Maxine Waters.
Thank you, Joy. I want you to know how proud we all are of you for using your voice and platform to educate and inform the public on the issues affecting their daily lives. I'm thrilled that now, as the first African-American woman to headline a primetime cable news show, millions more have the opportunity to welcome you into their homes every night. I want to thank the March on Washington Film Festival and its founder, Robert Raven, for his recognition. I'm so honored to be included among your awardees tonight, including my friend, the late Congressman John Lewis. In these challenging times during which we are faced with a devastating pandemic and unprecedented attacks on our democracy, it is very important to reflect on the legacy of the civil rights movement. We must, as this award demands, march on and remember that the struggle for justice continues today. Many of us who were around during segregation and experienced the unbridled brunt of racism and discrimination understand the threat we're facing today to our democracy, to our institutions, and the rule of law. Today, we're faced with an administration that has used the levers of government to give voice and comfort to white supremacists, lock immigrant children in cages, tear gas peaceful protesters, deploy federal troops to cities controlled by its political rivals, use the Department of Justice to reward friends and crush its enemies, hold hostage critical military aid to an allied country in exchange for campaign assistance, and now orchestrate an attack on vote by mail through the steady dismantling of the United States Postal Service. These actions are more common among dictatorships, and that is precisely what the current administration seeks to bring forth. The one thing standing in between this administration and total domination is the American people. While it has been said before, it is absolutely true this year. The 2020 election is the most important election of our lifetime. We must all fight back, reclaim our democracy, and vote like our lives depend on it. If you're watching this program tonight, make sure you understand the rules where you live and have requested your absentee ballot in time. You must also ensure your friends, family, and community are engaged and know where they can vote in person if they cannot vote by mail. Together, we can win the battle for the soul of America and remind our friends and allies around the world that this is the United States of America. We are the greatest democracy in the world, and we will not be taken down by anyone. Once again, thank you for this award. I want to dedicate it to millions of women women, people of color, and millennials in the United States and around the world who adopted me as their auntie and stood with me in the streets in protest and online, in the many marches and demonstrations that began the day after this president took office. Let's finish the job this November and vote our strength and numbers at the polls. Thank you so very much.
Congratulations to our March On Award recipients, Chairwoman Maxine Waters and Margaret Wang. We salute you both for your continued commitment to the movement. As we all know, we suffered a great loss this summer with the passing of civil rights giant, American hero, Congressman John Lewis. We at the March on Washington Festival have been intent on finding the best way to appropriately express our love, our gratitude for a man who dedicated his entire being to the fight for social justice. I reached out to Jamar Roberts, the resident choreographer at Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater, an artist whom I've observed for many years. Having witnessed firsthand the way Jamar thoughtfully applies his talent to the emotion of a moment, we commissioned him. We implored him to create a new piece that would chronicle the life of John Lewis. Jamar's original work, entitled In Memory, is a tribute to the late congressman. The film is an abstract narrative shot in black and white to resemble actual footage from the civil rights movement. His work seeks to illustrate a memory in the history of America and in the fight for freedom, justice, and equality. But most importantly, it was created to honor the memory of the inspirational figure who spent a lifetime leading us in that fight, Congressman Lewis. The heart of this piece captures the essence and power of a movement and a man who will forever live in our hearts and will echo on into the future. Ladies and gentlemen, the March on Washington Film Festival is proud to present the world premiere of Jamar Roberts' In Memory.
Special thanks to Jamar Roberts for creating and sharing that amazing piece with us. The Lifetime Legacy Award honors those rare individuals who have dedicated their lives to the pursuit of civil rights. These awardees have a constant focus on stamping out, once and for all, the blight of racism and the systemic degradation of others. Through grit, determination, and often personal and physical sacrifice, they have fought on behalf of our better angels. And in doing so, they have made the world a better place, and we are humbled to honor them. In August of 1963, the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom was held in the District of Columbia. On that day, in front of hundreds of thousands of people gathered at the Lincoln Memorial, the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. shared his dream with the nation, and a young man from rural Alabama delivered an impassioned cry for overdue justice. This city has borne witness to many historic moments, and I was honored this past June to have been a part of another historic day in D.C. at the newly named Black Lives Matter Plaza alongside Mayor Muriel Bowser and that same young man from Alabama. For me, overlooking that freshly painted plaza, I was witnessing an incredible sweep of history. I've had the honor of marching with Congressman Lewis on the Edmund Pettus Bridge, where he made history at the beginning of his life. To be on the roof of a building as he surveyed Black Lives Matter Plaza below at what would be the end of his life was moving beyond words. Here to present the 2020 March on Washington Film Festival Lifetime Legacy Award is the Mayor of Washington, D.C., my mayor, Muriel Bowser.
I'm Muriel Bowser, Mayor of Washington, D.C. On behalf of more than 700,000 D.C. residents, I want to welcome you and thank you for taking part in this special event. The March on Washington Film Festival has established itself as a gathering place for creators who are committed to chronicling the stories of the men, women, and children who have helped us build a fairer and more just America. The Lifetime Legacy Award recognizes an individual whose commitment to social justice and civil rights is unparalleled. There is no person more emblematic of these ideals than the late John Lewis. From a young age, John Lewis fought for equality, getting into good trouble, as he would say, and necessary trouble. Congressman Lewis carried on the fight for social justice up until his final days, and I was honored to stand next to him on Black Lives Matter Plaza right here in Washington, D.C. He was so proud of those who came here to protest and fight for justice, and he had hope because he knew his legacy will live on through the next generation of activists and leaders. So I am honored now to present the 2020 March on Washington Film Festival Lifetime Legacy Award to an American hero, Congressman John Lewis.
Thank you, Mayor Bowser. Hi, I'm Samara Fox, and I'm honored to serve as board chair of the March on Washington Film Festival. It was our intention to honor Mr. Lewis with this award in person this year. And though Mr. Lewis is no longer with us, his message and his example live on. Therefore, on behalf of our founder, Robert Rabin, and the board of directors, and with Mr. Lewis's courage, persistence, and spirit in mind, I proudly announce that the March on Washington Film Festival Lifetime Legacy Award will be renamed in perpetuity the John Robert Lewis Lifetime Legacy Award. This award will be presented annually to an individual whose life's work has sought to advance the dignity of all humans, no matter their circumstance, who sees value in everyone, who stands up and lends their voice in the face of injustice. With this award, we will honor those who choose to follow in the path that Mr. Lewis has shaped. And now I am pleased to welcome back the brilliant Frederick Yaneh.
Thank you, Samara. I had the privilege of joining Congressman Lewis for the Faith in Politics pilgrimage throughout the South. It was an amazing experience, an experience I will never forget. Mr. Lewis, this one is for you.
Thanks again, Fred. I first met one of our next performers, Jamie Johnson, on the 2019 Civil Rights Pilgrimage in his home state of Alabama. He's a renowned country music artist, prolific songwriter, 11-time Grammy Award nominee, and a consistent and powerful voice in the fight against pancreatic cancer, the brutal disease that John Lewis so bravely fought. Jamie is joined tonight by acclaimed blues musician Keb Mo, who has spent the past quarter century cultivating a reputation as a modern master of American roots music. His latest release, Oklahoma, won him the 2020 Grammy Award for Best Americana Album, and his philanthropic work in the arts and music education has won him the admiration of a new generation of fans. Both of these remarkable artists join us tonight to pay tribute to Mr. Lewis in song.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, oh, but now I'm found. I was blind, but now I see.
Was grace that taught my heart to fear. My heart to fear. And grace, my fears relieved. How precious did that grace appear. In the hour I first believed.
can't say this far, and grace will lead me home.
When we have been there, 10,000 years,
10,000 years,
bright, shining as the sun. We have no less days to sing God's praise than when we first begun.
But now I'm fine. I was blind, but now I see.
What a touching tribute. Thank you to all our awardees, presenters, special guest artists, and of course to you for joining us tonight. If you've enjoyed the speakers and performances this evening, then I know you are really looking forward to all of the stirring and thought-provoking content that will be presented in the week ahead. The March on Washington Film Festival is proud to showcase the stories of the movement, stories of the celebrated moments, and of the untold history of the well-known champions and the hidden heroes. But we can't do it without your vital support. If you are able, please click the donate button in the navigation bar at the top of your computer screen or visit marchonwashingtonfilmfestival.org/donate to make a contribution. To close out the gala, we have a special presentation of a short film from our friends at Comcast called A Dream for America. It presents Mr. Lewis in his own words, reflecting on the events of his consequential life. We hope it offers you inspiration to activate your own voice and gives you hope for the future. Have a great night and march on.
I grew up in rural Alabama, about 50 miles from Montgomery, outside of a little place called Troy. But one day in 1955, at the age of 15, I heard about Rosa Parks. I heard about Martin Luther King Jr. I heard Dr. King speaking on an old radio. I saw him on television. The action of Rosa Parks, the leadership, and the words of Dr. King inspired me to find a way to get in the way, to get in trouble, good trouble, necessary trouble. The first time I got arrested, I felt free. I felt liberated. I felt like I crossed over. In 1963, I was 23 years old. I was elected the national chairman of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, better known as SNCC. My first responsibility was to travel through parts of Arkansas, Alabama, and Georgia, and later to meet in Washington, D.C. in June of 1963 with others of the leadership, with President Kennedy at the White House. And in this meeting with President Kennedy, the Big Six included A. Philip Randolph, who had organized the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters. We also had Roy Wilkins of the NAACP, Whitney Young of the National Urban League, James Farmer, who was head of Encore, the Congress of Racial Equality, young Martin Luther King Jr., who was the president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, who had led the Montgomery bus boycott, and then John Lewis. And in that meeting, our leader, our spokesperson, A. Philip Randolph, spoke up. In his baritone voice, he said, "Mr. President, the black masses are restless, and we're going to march on Washington." We hadn't even discussed the idea of a march on Washington. President Kennedy didn't like what he heard. He started moving around in his chair. And he said, "If you bring all these people to Washington, won't there be violence and chaos and disorder? And we will never get a civil rights bill through the Congress." Mr. Randolph responded and said, "Mr. President, this will be an orderly, peaceful, nonviolent protest." We got up early on the morning of August 28th. It was a beautiful day. It was hot. The sun was shining bright. We made it to the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. I looked out and I saw so many people. Some people said it was only 250,000. I think it was one of the great undercounts of all time. I think it was probably of 500,000 people there. It was a sea of humanity, hundreds and thousands of people, black and white, men and women. I spoke number 6. I looked to my left and I saw hundreds of young people in the trees trying to get a better view of the podium. Then I looked straight ahead again. And I saw all of these young women and young men white and black, with their feet in the water, in the pool, trying to cool off. And I spoke. Several other people spoke, but the most meaningful speech that day, I thought, was a speech by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He was the last speaker. On this particular day, he knew he was preaching. He turned the marble steps of the Lincoln Memorial into a modern-day pulpit. And when he said, "I have a dream today," a dream deeply rooted in the American dream, you knew he wanted us to participate in sharing and believing in his dream. And he was saying, in effect, it's not just my dream, it is a dream for America. And when the march was all over, President Kennedy invited us back down to the White House. He stood in the door of the Oval Office, greeting each one of us, shaking our hands. He was like a beaming, proud father. He was so happy that everything had gone so well. And he said over and over again, "You did a good job, you did a good job." And when he got to Dr. King, he said, "And you had a dream." That was my last time seeing President Kennedy. The March on Washington, in my estimation, was one of the finest hours for the Civil Rights Movement. But 18 days after the March on Washington was over, it was a terrible bombing of the church in Birmingham, where 4 little girls were killed on a Sunday morning. That was a sad and dark hour for the movement. It just tore out the essence of your heart. And many of us mourned and cried. I happened to be back in Alabama visiting my mother and father, my sisters and brothers, when we heard about what happened. And I called the office in Atlanta, the office of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and we made a decision that I should go to Birmingham. And I met my friend, Julian Bond, the communication director for the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. And we got there right about the same time. And we stood across the street from the church. And we remained there for the funeral of the 4 little girls. Dr. King delivered the eulogy of 3 of them. But it made us more determined than ever before to go all out to end segregation and racial discrimination, to get a civil rights bill passed, do whatever it took to get a voting rights bill passed. I saw that and believe that through politics we can bring about change. I was with Robert Kennedy, campaigning with him when we heard that Dr. King had been assassinated. We were together in Indianapolis, Indiana. And that evening, when I heard that Dr. King had been assassinated, I said to myself, we still have Robert Kennedy. After the funeral was over, I traveled to Los Angeles and teamed up with Cesar Chavez to campaign for Robert Kennedy. And in the night of the Los Angeles and California primary, I was in Los Angeles, was in Bobby Kennedy's room. He never came back. He was killed that night. And after the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. and Robert Kennedy, I became convinced more than ever before that I had to do something to pick up where they left off. And I again made a decision that I would give everything I had, everything, to do what I could to help make America better and to create a more perfect union.
Well, Lord, somebody's calling my name. Well, Lord, somebody's calling my name. There was a girl named Rosie, and she sure was fine. Killed her husband just to make her mine. She threw me away and moved me out the door. Now her and that man together once more. Well, Lord, somebody's calling my name. Well, Lord, somebody's calling my name. There was a man living in Jacksonville, a perfume head. Heard that he slept on a feather bed. I wanted that coin purse that he swung around. So now